Australia is in big trouble. On Sunday, Australia's most iconic city on its most iconic landmark saw around 90,000 members of the Red Green Alliance march for Palestine, blocking the bridge for the day. I know what some people might say, but these were just people marching against injustice and suffering in Gaza. Well, I'm sure some people there were doing just that. But the evidence paints a rather different picture. One that lets you get a sneak peek behind where Australia is headed, and it's not pretty. Look, this protest wasn't even supposed to happen. New South Wales police tried to block it. They warned it was too dangerous, too disruptive, especially on one of the busiest pieces of infrastructure in the country. But a professional activist and Marxist named Josh Lees, the face of the Palestine Action Group, took them to court. In a stunning decision, the Supreme Court sided with him. Justice Belinda Rigg ruled that inconvenience wasn't enough to shut it down, and that the right to protest outweighed traffic, safety, and public disruption. So just like that, one of the most radical protest movements in modern Australian history was given full legal protection. Look, I do fully agree with people's right to protest. That's part of what living in a democratic, free society entails. But what followed showed that quite a number of people within said society aren't at all very big on democracy, or Australia for that matter. Let's start with the obvious Islamist elements we saw on Sunday. They weren't hard to spot. Many were openly and proudly carrying flags often used by terror organisations like, and take a look at this one, or how about this one? And some were carrying what closely resembled Hamas flags, and they even had what resembled Hezbollah flags, with a few edits not to attract the law. Again, these people weren't hiding their allegiances, and perhaps more dangerously, they are no longer scared to do so. It's 2025 and the Red Green Alliance has been so normalised that they can hide behind the facade of the Gaza war and wave Islamist flags on the most iconic landmark in a Western liberal democracy. But if that wasn't enough, how about I introduce you to Hizb ut-Tahrir, an Islamist organisation that's not only banned in many parts of Europe, but some of the largest Muslim countries in the world. Yet, they were a leading presence at this Sydney march, and in Australia, they are freely allowed to do whatever they want. Look at this fine gentleman here. Well, it seems by our lands, he's certainly not talking about Australia, so perhaps he should be the one to pack his bags and leave. His hateful ideology is not needed here. And here's something else you won't see on the news. Clips like these are already getting throttled, tagged, or quietly censored. Canberra's new online safety rules kick in this December, and they'll give bureaucrats broad powers to pull anything that undermines social cohesion. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN, and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, Australian, UK, and EU law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls, Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries, and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton VPN since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. Now go back to the video. How about this other fine gentleman here talking about how this is also Australia's war? And finally, this caption on one of their videos talking about how the flag of Islam has risen in the heart of Sydney. Dear viewers, Australia's immigration system has failed. Its dreams of assimilating these people have failed. But perhaps the most egregious displays at this march were of the Iranian regime. More specifically, posters of the Ayatollah Khomeini being very prominently visible at this march. In fact, there was one at the very front right next to the organisers and some high-profile attendees like Julian Assange, members of parliament, and Craig Foster. Now, you may say perhaps they don't endorse this, but common sense says, in perhaps the most high-profile pro-Gaza protest in Australia, someone who was part of the organising team or some of the leaders on the front lines would have instructed this person to go away. The optics obviously would be bad. There were hundreds at the front, and it appears nobody, including the organisers, could be bothered to do this. That to me paints a rather clear picture. We have in fact seen this before, with significant support for the IRGC being very apparent during street-level pro-Gaza protests. This is of course the green side. Now, what was the red side doing? Well, their intersectional worldview that all struggles are magically the same meant that what's happening in Gaza must also automatically apply to Australia, because if Israel is a colonial state, then Australia, which became a state through settlement, is apparently just as evil. And the conclusion, if you stand with Palestine, you must also be against Australia's existence. Hence why protesters like this one were calling to abolish Australia due to its colonial past. Just remember, they never tell you what the post-Australian state would look like or who gets to govern it. Or how about this one, where this person is calling being Australian genocidal, and the fact that Australia once again needs to be abolished as a nation state. In the same protest, these protesters burnt the Australian flag and spray painted slogans like abolish Australia. Australian flags at this protest were seen as a symbol of oppression. What about the people involved in this movement? They're not exactly moderates either. Take Mehreen Faruqi, the Green senator who's been a prominent face in these protests. She's long described Australia as structurally racist and refers to Australia Day as Invasion Day.
I've just returned from Pakistan after seeing my Ammi. Australia's criminal inaction on climate is deeply felt there.
In her memoir, Too Migrant, Too Muslim, Too Loud, she paints the country as irredeemably patriarchal and colonial, and has said that calls to abolish Australia aren't radical, but necessary. Then there's Nasser Masti, the president of the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network. He's been a loud voice in the media for the pro-Palestine movement. But what rarely gets mentioned is that Masdi has a past conviction for a violent kidnapping in the early 90s, and now he leads the pro-Palestine movement. Quite ironic, don't you think? And during this march, he declared the bridge now belongs to them, whoever that is, and that burning the Aussie flag is no big deal as that's just a piece of silk.
Will you condemn the burning of the Australian flag?
It's a flag, it's a piece of silk.
You and I both know his tune would change if what was burnt was his holy book instead. And finally, Wissam Haddad, a Salafi preacher who's faced civil action for allegedly being racist against Jews and spreading anti-Semitic conspiracies. He didn't speak at the Sydney rally, but was photographed attending with the black flag I mentioned earlier. These are not just some random activists. They are ideologues, some with criminal histories, others with radical worldviews, and they're being treated as legitimate voices in a movement that's growing louder by the week. This is the danger of the Red-Green Alliance. Together, they've created a movement that hides behind humanitarian slogans, but is driven by something far more radical, the dismantling of the Australian nation-state itself. And they are gaining ground. They've realised that if they march under the banner of Gaza, they can say and do almost anything, especially as they have a strong sectarian voting bloc that absolutely influences the Labor Party both federally and at a state level through sheer numbers. Look, I want this war to end too, as soon as possible. It's a humanitarian disaster that's devastating innocent Palestinians and Israelis alike, and it's deeply affecting Jewish Australians who are watching this unfold in real time, many of whom I call my friends. But while the bombs fall, Hamas is winning something they never could on the battlefield, the PR war. And here's where Israel and Jews more broadly lose, because they are just 15 million people. Muslims, nearly 2 billion. When it comes to scale, especially online, it's not a fair fight. Right now, there's a strange alliance forming. Far-left activists, far-right ideologues, and hardline Islamists, all united against Israel, and in many cases against Jews altogether. That coalition is gaining ground, and Gaza is just an excuse. In places like Australia, it's pushing radicalism into the mainstream. And today, this isn't simply about Gaza anymore. It's about what kind of country we want Australia to be.
Hey, you made it to the end. As always, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. A massive thank you to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep making content like this. If you want to support the channel, consider joining the crew. Just hit the join button below or head over to Patreon. Even a small pledge goes a long way, and I would genuinely love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.